Now, imagine this. You are told that you're carrying a perfectly healthy girl, so do you terminate your pregnancy? Can you believe this actually happens? I'm a British-born Indian Hindu and first became aware of son preference within my culture when I was 9. I heard a woman say that her greatest wish was to bear a son for her husband. Since then, I have been questioning why that is. I've always felt treasured by my parents and can sense their pride and love for me. So it's difficult for me to comprehend why daughters are unwanted. And trying to understand this mindset is an issue that's close to my heart, as I turned out to have 4 daughters. It's not as though I didn't want a son, but I believe that choosing the gender of your child is left to chance, right? Hinduism is one of few religions where there are female deities at the forefront. They're highly revered and worshipped by staunch followers. Many say that it's considered auspicious to have a girl born into the family, as daughters are akin to goddesses and signify strength, educational and financial wealth. For centuries, many cultures have held a higher value for the male child. This is highlighted in a recent episode called The Midwife, set in the 1950s, where an expectant father refused to entertain the notion of having a daughter. As a result of the war, he was the last surviving male in the family and needed a son to inherit the business. Fortunately, he came round and was able to accept his daughter, and there was a happy ending to this tale. However, in reality, there are too many people willing to defy nature in order to produce that prized son. Maybe it's the availability of choice that compels people to have gender-selective abortions. In India, infanticide rates were dropping by the 1970s, but the advent of ultrasound technology was set to change the future of the gender ratio. In the early 90s, I visited India as a newlywed and was advised by many in excited tones that there's this pill available that guarantees a boy. Apparently it's foolproof, 100% successful, and clearly I didn't take one. But I knew of couples who did, and they used scans to guarantee them a son. I remember one particular case where a lady with 3 daughters was desperate to have a boy, and after 1 or 2 abortions, she got the news she was waiting for. She was carrying a boy. So she continued with this pregnancy, only to give birth to another daughter. Still, amazingly, she was unperturbed by this and continued trying until she eventually had the son that she so longed for. There are many childless couples in the world whose only wish is to become parents. A previous Indian neighbour of mine endured many years of heartache before coming to terms with the fact that she was medically unable to have children. When she'd all but given up hope, she became pregnant, and it was nothing short of a miracle, except she had a daughter and had to endure comments along the lines of, "If only God had given you a boy." So I return to the question of why. In a world where we talk about feminism and equal rights for women, there has been a great deal of progress. But here, girls are being denied life before they're even born. To answer this, as part of my art practice, I have been researching the ancient Hindu code of conduct written by Manu, our equivalent to Christianity's Adam. Known as the Manu Dharma Shastra, it covers the conduct, privileges and obligations of each division in society. I'd like to highlight a few verses regarding women that particularly affect me. In one verse, Manu states that during her lifetime, a woman shall be under the care of her father, followed by her husband, and if widowed, her son. A woman will never have independence. Well, I was quite outraged when I first heard that. But then I began to wonder if in fact all he was trying to say was that women should be looked after. Another verse states that if a wife does not produce a son after 11 years, then she could be replaced, which means that my husband could have left me about twice by now. On the other hand, you have this verse, where clearly it shows that women should be revered. There are many contradictory verses phrases in Manu's code, and it seems to me that people will pick and choose the ones that they prefer and then apply them to their daily lives in the name of religion. People say that they want to have sons because they want an heir, a continuation of lineage, a financial gain through earnings and a dowry when their son gets married, a social security in old age so somebody to look after them, and finally, the son to perform their last rites. Equally, people don't want daughters because the emotional and financial burden of raising a daughter for another family's benefit is likened to watering a neighbour's garden. They want to avoid inheritance laws that say the estate must be shared equally between all children, including daughters, and because of a risk of family honour. Referring to this last point, I recall a funny conversation I had with a young woman who came to England in her 20s when she got married. I asked her why Indian society has a son preference, and the only reason she could think of was, well, what would you do if your daughter went to college and got pregnant? I can understand some of the reasons families feel the pressure to have sons. I'm aware that I've led a privileged life compared to those in India who are on the poverty line and have had no access to education. They feel that their only hope of progress lies in having a son, but gendercide is not the solution. Surely we need to treasure our daughters, who are so very precious. If we can empower today's generation, the following ones will be confident and valued. I think about the personal consequence of not having a son. I don't know what it's like to have a son, how to raise one, or even how to change a boy's nappy. I can only imagine what it's like to run around after a boy who's got bundles of energy, to deal with a child who's not so highly strong and might settle his quarrels with his siblings with a good old-fashioned fist fight instead of giving them the eagles. Honestly, my daughters can have a full-blown argument with the minutest of facial twitches. I remember visitors coming to see me after the birth of my second daughter, who looked like they were going to a funeral. There was pity, there was arrogance from those who had boys. Some would say, never mind. I mean, who minded anyway? I've lost count of the number of times I've been asked if I was trying for a boy, or if I'm going to keep trying. Luckily for me, I've not really had any pressure from my own family. Maybe a little disappointment, that's understandable. But what effect is this mindset having on our society? I naively thought that it could be a positive thing for women. Economics say that a lower supply would command a higher value. I thought that women could have their pick of a husband, and men would compete to become the most eligible. How wrong was I? How could I forget the power of patriarchy? Especially now there are more men than women. This gender imbalance has in fact led to a boom in the trafficking trade. The northern state of Punjab has the most skewed ratio in India, and some villages have no females left. Wives are being kidnapped or bought and being shared between brothers quite often. It's a horrific existence for these women. There are rare cases where families bring back their daughters to the safety of their own home, but even then, they become outcasts in their own society and are subject to verbal and physical abuse, including from other women. I all too often observe that women are complicit in upholding this patriarchal system when we should be uniting to make positive change. Furthermore, as fewer women are available, there's a greater need for them to fulfill domestic roles, denying them the opportunity to build a career and play a wider role in society. And so the cycle continues. In my mind, there's no doubt that these reasons behind the mentality for preferring sons are out of date. Many more women are focused on pursuing careers. Many are trying to eliminate this tradition of dowry. More women are able to look after their own elderly parents than ever before. And when my aunt sadly passed away a few years ago, It was her one and only child, a daughter, who performed her last rites. So whilst progress is being made, I still worry that we're taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. Most disturbing are the reports in the Indian press of parents who are having their daughters undergo gender reassignment surgeries at a very young age. It's not only sad, this desperation to have a son, but it's futile because their son will never be a fully functioning male. And as this practice is occurring in the wealthy and educated circles, it leads me to one conclusion, and that the real reason behind son preference is simply status. Gendercide is not a problem confined to India. It happens in other countries and cultures too, and clearly this problem transcends geographical boundaries. I was under the care of Northamptonshire NHS when I had my first 2 children, and I knew that I was carrying girls. By the time I moved to Harrow a few years later, the ultrasound departments had imposed a blanket ban on revealing the sex of the fetus. A couple of years ago, the Telegraph reported a story where a doctor in the UK was approached by an undercover pregnant journalist who asked for an abortion on the grounds of fetal gender. The doctor then referred her to a colleague for an abortion on alternate grounds, as sex selection is not a permitted criteria. Fiona Bruce MP campaigned to amend the UK law to make gender-selective abortions specifically illegal. However, this bill didn't pass because of concern around stigmatisation of the communities involved. Dr. Sarah Wollaston, the chairwoman of the Health Select Committee, felt that the amendment was unnecessary and could have unintended consequences. Occasionally I wonder if these aborted girls have had a lucky escape. What sort of undervalued life would they have led? But I'm not a defeatist, and gender imbalance is not just a number. As it's predicted that this ratio is only set to worsen, something has to be done to start to change people's thinking. Much is happening to try and bring about social change, and there are a number of NGOs working to eliminate this problem. And more recently, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has launched a £10 million Save the Daughter campaign in India. My daughters may or may not carry our family name forward, but that doesn't mean that the family tree ends here. As parents, we will continue to live in their faces, hearts and minds. I'm not happy that I don't have a son, but I'm not unhappy that I have daughters. I'm simply content with what nature gave me. Like my parents, I love my children immensely, and I couldn't be prouder of them. I wouldn't change them for the world. I'd like to show you a short film which I made in response to my research. And I ask that you hold these small wax sculptures in your hand whilst watching the film. They'll be handed out just about now. Thank you.
પૂજ્ય માં, પપ્પા અને આપ બને મજામાં હશો. માં, આ પત્ર ખાસ આપને લખ્યો છે કારણ કે આપ મારી ખૂબ નજીક છો. હું જ તમારામાં છું. માં, હું તો તમારા પોતાનો જ ભાગ છું. માં, મેં એક દુઃખદ સમાચાર જાણ્યા. મને વિશ્વાસ નથી થતો કે મારી મા મને જન્મવા દેતી રોકવા માંગે છે. મને પૂરેપૂરી ખાતરી છે કે આ આપની ઈચ્છા નથી. સમાજની બીકે ભઈએ આપે આવા વિચારને તમારામાં રાખ્યો છે. માં, આપણા પાડોશીને તમે કહેતા હતા કે મારે હવે દીકરી નથી જોઈતી. મારી માં, તું અત્યારે મારા શરીરને મસરી નાખવા, તોડી નાખવા, કાપી નાખવા માટે જઈ રહી છો. હું તને રોકી પણ નથી શકતી. હું અત્યંત નાજુક છું. મને વાચા નથી. મારા હાથ તો લોટની કણકથી પણ નાજુક છે. માં, મને સ્પર્શ કરતા પણ આવડતું નથી. તો તને ગળે ભરાવીને વાળપન કેમ કરવો? તો એ મને તેનું દુઃખ નથી, કારણ કે હું તારા ધબકારામાં જ છું. ખરેખર તો મારું હૃદય પણ તારા ધબકારાથી જ ધબકે છે. માં મને જન્મવા દે. મારે તારી આંગળી પકડવી ચાલતા શીખવું છે. માં, મારે મારા નાના પગેથી તારા ખોળા ખૂંદવા છે. તારા આંગણમાં નાચવું છે. તું ચિંતા ના કરીશ. હું પપ્પાનો ખર્ચ નહીં વધારું. તેમને કહેજે કે હું દીદીના જૂના કપડાં પહેરીશ. તેમના તૂટેલા રમકડાથી રમીશ. મારી મેતે ભણીશ. સાદી નિશાળમાં જઈશ. અરે, તમને ઘરકામમાં પણ મદદ કરીશ. તમારી જિંદગીમાં ક્યાંય વચ્ચે નહીં આવું. મોટી થાવ અને વિદાય સમય થશે ત્યારે બધી જ વ્યવસ્થા કરીશ. દહેજનો પ્રશ્ન નહીં ઊભો થવા દઉં. માં, તમે મોટા થશો, કૈડા થશો ત્યારે તમારી આ લાડકી તમારી લાકડી બનશે. માં, મને રહેવા દ્યો, જીવવા દ્યો, જીવવા દ્યો. માં, આ પત્ર તમને એટલા માટે લખ્યો છે કે આપ પપ્પાને સમજાવો. આપનું જો ના ચાલે, આપ મને ન બચાવી શકો, તો મારો આ પત્ર સમાજમાં ફેલાવશો. સમાજની દરેક માં, દરેક દાદીને આપજો, જેથી સ્ત્રીઓ સ્ત્રીત્વનું આવું ઘોર અપમાન કરી પાપ નહીં વારે. માં, આમ જ જો ચાલશે તો પ્રભુની દુનિયા કેમની ચાલશે? શક્તિમાંથી માનવીનો વિશ્વાસ ઉઠી જશે. જય માં. એ જ તમારી લાડલી ન થઈ શકેલી તમારી દીકરી.
Making this work removed any doubts and any emptiness that I may have felt, and I can only hope that it will have the same effect